In January 1943, a top-secret telegram from Reich's Marshal Göring arrived at the remote Petsamo air base in the frozen Arctic reaches of northern Finland. As the signals officer on duty, I was the first to decipher its urgent contents. The Führer had ordered the immediate establishment of 90 Luftwaffe field divisions to bolster the crumbling Eastern Front. This was no mere administrative note. It was a dire imperative that struck at the heart of our isolated outpost, signaling my own inevitable conscription into the infantry. The directive was a direct fallout from the cataclysmic Battle of Stalingrad, that savage maelstrom along the Volga River which, even as the telegram arrived, was hurtling toward its inexorable, annihilating conclusion for the German Sixth Army. Nearly 250,000 men, elite soldiers, hardened veterans, and raw recruits alike, were either slain in the relentless urban carnage, maimed beyond recognition amid the rubble and snow, hastily evacuated on groaning hospital trains, or, in the cruelest twist, herded eastward toward the gulags of Siberia, their futures erased in Stalin's vast penal empire. The Stalingrad fiasco remains, to this day, my profoundest shock during the entire Nazi era, eclipsed only by the utter collapse of the Reich in 1945 and the horrifying revelations of the death camp's industrialized genocide, truths that would later shatter any lingering illusions. Of course, the official communiqué from Führer headquarters, disseminated through censored channels, painted the debacle in the rosiest hues possible, a desperate gambit to salvage national morale amid the gathering gloom. It concluded with that transparently pathetic flourish. However, at this very hour, the divisions of the Sixth Army are already in the process of being re-established. I could not suppress a bitter smirk at the evasion, sensing the High Command's palpable uneasiness lurking behind the hollow rhetoric. Yet in that moment of fragile relief, I clung to the hope that the military elite, those somnolent generals whom I, in my ill-informed fervor, held culpable rather than the Führer himself, had finally roused from their strategic slumbers. I laid the blame squarely at their feet for the operational blunders, the overextended supply lines across the steppe, the underestimation of Soviet resilience, the failure to heed warnings of encirclement. How I yearned for this bloodbath to galvanize them, to whip them into unyielding support for the Führer's titanic existential struggle against the heirs of Genghis Khan, the Bolshevik hordes who, in my mind, embodied barbarism incarnate. It still eluded me entirely that this was not Stalin's war alone, but Hitler's, a catastrophe of his own making, from the hubristic gamble on a southern thrust to the refusal to countenance retreat. The Führer's personal culpability was, of course, shrouded from the German populace by a veil of propaganda, lest it erode the myth of infallibility. But this was no hour for recriminations or finger-pointing. It demanded unflinching action, raw sacrifice, the total mobilization of a nation's fraying sinews. Though I harbored a visceral hatred for the military's rigid hierarchies, its parade ground absurdities, and the soul-crushing conformity it imposed, I steeled myself to contribute my part in replenishing the army's hemorrhaging ranks. I knew the summons would come swiftly, perhaps within days, but in the quiet recesses of my heart, I had already volunteered, binding myself to duty in this crucible of fate. It marked the second and final time I would make such a pledge, a fleeting echo of my earlier, more naive enlistments. On my crackling radio receiver, amid the static of distant broadcasts, I tuned into a raucous rally unfolding in Berlin's storied Sportpalast, that cavernous arena where the Reich's propagandists conjured mass hysteria from despair. There, Joseph Goebbels, the venomous dwarf of the Nazi inner circle, unleashed what would become the speech of his venomous career, a torrent of oratory that even earned a rare nod of approval from the Führer himself. Addressing a motley throng of bandaged wounded from the front, stoic nurses in starched uniforms, fervent Hitler youth with their scraped knees and shining eyes, and grizzled factory workers from the Ruhr, spared briefly from their 12-hour shifts at the lathes, Goebbels channeled the crowd's exhaustion into a frenzy of renewed zeal. His voice, amplified to a screeching crescendo, hammered home each incendiary sentence, capping it with that insidious, repetitive interrogative. Do you want total war? The war-weary audience, their faces gaunt with rationed hunger and flickering torchlight, responded each time with a thunderous, desperate affirmative, yes. their echoes reverberating like a collective death rattle. It was a masterstroke of psychological manipulation, a dark alchemy that squeezed the dregs from a nation teetering on collapse, igniting the last embers of resolve in hearts grown leaden with loss. From every crevice of the German war machine, from the soot-choked armaments factories of the Ruhr belching forth tanks and shells, the vast agricultural heartlands plowed by women and POWs under leaden skies, the ivy-clad universities now stripped of scholars and repurposed as barracks, to the skeletal remnants of the Luftwaffe squadrons, the final able-bodied men surged toward the front, a human tide to staunch the divisions bleeding out in the east. Göring's telegram unleashed a deluge of follow-up directives, each more frantic than the last. 50 men dispatched forthwith to Kirkens for rigorous training under the tutelage of battle-scarred instructors from the elite Gebirgsjäger mountain troops. A week hence another 50. Then yet more until the Petsamo air base, once a haven of relative aerial detachment, stood denuded of every last fit infantryman, its hangars echoing with absence. Helmut, my wiry comrade with his perpetual smirk and knack for improvisation, was among the vanguard, having caught the commander's favorable notice by jury-rigging a bunk bed into the dim underground command center, a touch of domestic ingenuity amid the institutional chill. I lingered among the rearguard, the last to be peeled away. The commander, a steely lieutenant colonel, whose face was etched with the lines of perpetual vigilance, was loath to release me, valuing my signals expertise in this nerve center of northern operations. Yet I knew, with a grim certainty born of the hour's gravity, that my reprieve was illusory. I refused to squander this pivotal phase of the war in the cushioned safety of radar scopes and dispatch rooms. No, I yearned to stake my life on the frozen line, to etch my name into the saga of survival. With the colonel's reluctant blessing, I had already commenced schooling my successor, a 60-year-old relic from the organization tote, that sprawling engineering leviathan akin to America's Corps of Engineers, tasked with fortifying the Reich's frontiers. This graybeard, hard of hearing and rusty in drill, fumbled with Morse code keys and tactical maps, his arthritic fingers betraying decades of civilian toil. Everywhere my gaze fell, personnel shortages gnawed like frostbite. Not enough hands to hoist the ponderous bombs onto 88 fuselages under the midnight aurora, to man the perimeter watches against prowling Allied bombers, or to patrol the jagged fjords for insidious Russian commandos slinking through the tundra shadows. The commander fired off frantic telegrams to higher echelons in Oslo, beseeching exemptions from this voracious requisition of his dwindling manpower, invoking the airbase's strategic isolation and the peril of undefended flanks. But entreaties fell on deaf, bureaucratic ears. The maw of the front demanded feeding. At February's end, in 1943's iron grip, my marching orders materialized, a crisp, impersonal summons etched on Wehrmacht stationery. In a brief, poignant ceremony beneath the base's sodium lamps, the commander pinned upon my tunic the cross for distinguished war service, second class, its enamel gleaming like a talisman against the encroaching void. Then it was time. Swallowed by total polar darkness, I clambered aboard a rumbling truck, its canvas flaps whipping in the gale, for the jolting transit to Kirkens Air Base. There, nestled amid snow-draped pines, sprawled the nascent training encampment for one company of the newly minted Luftwaffe Field Division for the Arctic Ocean Front, a ragtag assembly of airmen reborn as foot soldiers. I reunited with a handful of Petsamo acquaintances amid the barbed wire perimeters and canvas tents, though Helmut had vanished into another company, his trail lost to the blizzards. Now I was a Lancer, that laconic German sobriquet for the common infantryman, evoking the gritty mercenaries of medieval lore, Landscanetten, those sellswords who roamed Europe's battlefields for pay and plunder. The term Lancer carried a nostalgic timbre, laced with wry fatalism, echoing through barracks ballads like "Was Kinder Lancer den Nachttraum?" What dreams haunt the lowly grunt? He dreams of his girl, her letters tucked in his breast pocket, a fragile bulwark against the mud and shells. As much as soldiering repulsed me, its rote humiliations, its cult of blind obedience, at that instant I felt not pride, but a somber contentment in donning the mantle of Lancer, acutely aware that the war's nadir had dawned, a gauntlet of endurance, no man could evade. No sooner had I pitched my tent in the gale-lashed camp than I was summoned to report to the first lieutenant from the mountain troops, a wiry veteran whose sun-leathered face bespoke campaigns in the Dolomites and Caucasus. From our inaugural handshake, an instinctive mutual distrust crackled like static, mirroring the prickly antagonism I'd nursed toward Hino, that bombastic young Voke chieftain from my boyhood. A similar, nebulous angst stirred in my gut, a vestige of childhood terrors, though maturity and the forge of frontline proximity had tempered my capacity to wrestle such phantoms. Good-looking in a chiseled Aryan poster way, arrogant as a Prussian drill master, festooned with ribbons from Narvik to Crete, and vain enough to polish his ski goggles nightly, the lieutenant embodied the fanatic soldier, exacting, unyielding, a martinet whose every barked order sought to etch discipline into our flabby airman bones. As Hino had once aspired in youth camps, this officer's zeal was to hammer us into competent killers, forged in the anvil of Arctic rigor. Ironically, that very ambition aligned with my own hidden resolve to hone survival edges sharp enough to carve a path home. The chasm lay in our philosophies. For me, martial prowess and raw courage were instrumental, mere tools to end this infernal crusade and reclaim civilian life. For him, they were sacrosanct virtues, the alpha and omega of a warrior's creed. He chafed at my introspective air, my faintly unsoldierly poise, the way my eyes lingered on the auroral veils rather than snapping to his gaze, and I recoiled from his haughty insouciance, the casual cruelty of his reprimands that stripped men of dignity like wind flaying snow. Training commenced with brutal immediacy, a regimen that thrust us to the precipice of fracture, worlds apart from the perfunctory goose-stepping we'd endured in war's rosy dawn. This was unsparing pragmatism, distilled to pure lethality. No salutes or spit shines, only the calculus of kill or be killed. Drills bifurcated between foot-slogging assaults, classic infantry rushes that demanded dismounting skis, prone crawls through drifts, and explosive sprints, and ski-bound forays for scouting or schlepping munitions across the featureless white. We donned hooded white smocks over standard Feldgrau, spectral ghosts in the landscape, but in this murderous polar climb, where thermometers plummeted to -40, winds howled like banshees, nothing warded off the bone-deep chill that clawed at marrow. Ever we humped our rucksacks, bloated with life's detritus, spare socks frozen stiff, tinned ersatz sausage, bandoliers of 7.92 millimeters rounds, the collective weight conspiring to plunge us elbow-deep into powder at every stride. The apex ordeal unfolded over 5 interminable days, a foot march interspersed with tactical vignettes, stealthy reconnaissance patrols ghosting through birch thickets, simulated assaults on mock bunkers ringed by tripwires, evasion drills snaking through ambuscade setups, and the nadir of all, erecting camp under night's eternal shroud. No modern bivouacs graced us. Instead, we wrestled triangular tarpaulins, relics of Frederick the Great's era, buttoning them into precarious lean-tos with numb, fumbling fingers. In that Arctic abyss, gales keening at 80 knots, darkness absolute save for the glint of stars, manipulating the aluminum fasteners devolved into Sisyphean torment, a task shirked like plague by all, reducing hardened men to tears amid oaths and shivers. Digging snow caves and lining them with scavenged brushwood paled as mere child's play by comparison. Once raised, our tents were naught but insulated graves, dim hollows where hypothermia lurked, sleep a myth, warmth a jest. Fires? Forbidden, lest they betray us to phantom foes. Illumination? Nil, for authenticity's sake, total blackout, raw immersion in the elements, merciless maw. Our Gebergsjager mentors, scarred alumni of such infernos, from the ice cliffs of Monte Cassino to the passes of the Elbrus, saw no mercy's place. They'd bled in earnest, so we must sup the same bitter cup. Huddled in fetal clusters, we endured the vigil for dawn, which birthed no sun, no thaw, merely a marginal reprieve from stasis's predatory cold, the kind that gnaws joints to brittleness. The retrograde to barracks laid bare the lieutenant's hubris. Astride skis, he had misjudged our mettle against nature's fury, the storm's whiteout interring us alive. The company splintered into ragged knots, each clawing blindly toward sanctuary, breath ragged plumes in the vortex. Providence spared us fatalities, but not the toll. Stragglers staggered an hours late, digits blackened by frostbite, faces pallid masks of agony. The lieutenant, shadowed by court-martial's specter, had death claimed us, paced the wire with feigned stoicism, his vanity cracked. My squad, threading the gale early, reported intact. He waved me off with customary scorn, his eyes averted from the mirror of his miscalculation. Mercifully, this officious specter was soon excised from our ranks. It transpired during the battalion's inaugural muster for frontline baptism, when platoon leaders were anointed amid the crunch of snow. The incoming battalion commander, a squat captain whose mustache bristled like wire, would shadow my war's twilight years, a fixture in fortune and folly alike. At our debut parley, he lambasted me for a lax salute, fists balled, voice a Bavarian bellow, striving to ape the departed lieutenant's severity. Yet conviction eluded him. Later, adorned with the Knight's Cross and elevated to major for feats in the Murmansk salient, he confided post-surrender, with a wry grimace, "Now I must hawk shoelaces again." His bark masked frailty, an insecurity that armored him against the void. As Oberstreiter Corporal, I inherited a group of 15 souls, 12 riflemen clutching Mausers like talismans, 3 manning the MG-34's snarling maw, and I, toting an MP-40 submachine gun, its stamped steel a cold comfort. Our remit, sentinel duty over the colossal hydroelectric plant near Kolosjoki, that throbbing artery powering the nickel refineries of Petsamo, the Reich's lifeline for chromium alloys in tank plating and aircraft skins. Organization tow crews, those indefatigable fortifiers, swathed the turbines and generators in meter-thick concrete sarcophagi, a bulwark against the lancers of the Red Air Force. Labor pulsed ceaselessly, day into endless night, floodlit starkly against the gloom, a beacon for bombers, yet urgency trumped peril. Our secondary vigil entailed ski patrols along the humming power lines snaking through the taiga, ever vigilant for saboteurs. Russian Spetsnaz precursors, ghosts in white who nipped at infrastructure like wolves at a flank. The frontier was no iron curtain, but a ragged necklace of bastions, pillboxes, and dugouts, flung across tundra voids, porous to infiltrators who prowled 30 kilometers deep, bartering scalps in the no-man's-land fog. Snow's mantle cloaked our routes, but so too the traps. Most forays unfolded on skis, blades whispering over crust. Every undulation a potential ambush, cradle. Contingencies drilled into muscle, at Wrexham. Right wheel, the file fanned into a skirmish line, wheeling to enfilade the foe's rear. Links, mirrored leftward. A lexicon of maneuvers countered every snare, flanking fire, bounding overwatch, arsenal honed in blizzards to parry the reaper. Once mid-patrol, I barked Wrexham into a hail of SMG fire from birch blinds. We evaded the scythe, but the shadows melted and scathed, leaving only Cordite's acrid ghost. Mines, too, were omnipresent sentinels. The Ivans knew our trails as we theirs, seeding them with TM-38s and Teller mines beneath the powder. Despite probes with bayonets and wary prods, innovation outpaced vigilance. The Soviets unveiled aerial booby traps, S-mines dangling from brush like Judas fruit, detonating in facial fans of shrapnel. One dawn patrol, such a devil claimed 3 of mine. Faces pulped to crimson ruin, eye sockets emptied, jaws unhinged in silent screams. One perished en route, lashed to an improvised bobsled of splintered skis and tent poles. His gurgles haunting the evac teams, fevered push to aid stations amid the drifts. Summer 1943 hurled my squad to Fort Romanov, a promontory clawing seaward on the Arctic littoral betwixt Petsamo and the Rybachy Peninsula, that dagger of land thrusting toward Murmansk's convoy lanes. Our charge, infantry screen for the Kriegsmarine's coastal batteries, those snarling 15 centimeters howitzers that dueled the Soviets for dominion of the Barents. The fort itself was a Gibraltar of granite, sheer cliffs plummeting to foam-lashed boulders, a natural redoubt pocked with gun pits and ammo hoists. Yet it quaked under ceaseless Soviet barrages from Rybachy, where Stalin's guns, Katyusha's belching rocket storms, towed 152mm behemoths, outgunned and outranged us, their salvos a thunderous requiem. When Allied convoys, PQ-17 successors, lumbering with Lend-Lease steel and spam, hove into view, bound for Murmansk's quays, the deluge escalated to apocalypse. Each 122 millimeters round birthed a shrapnel blizzard of iron and fractured stone, pelting the naked rock like divine wrath. Naval gunners, lashed to their breeches amid acrid cordite, traded fire doggedly. Some muttered curses at the irony, claiming the Ivan's mounts, those precision calibers chewing our embrasures, were purloined from Uncle Sam's arsenals via Alaska routes. Others demurred, invoking Peter the Great's legacy. Russians as artillery savants since Poltava, their crews sighting with balalaikaide precision. The bluejackets bore the brunt, exposed at their pieces, while we lancers burrowed into clefts and lava tubes honeycombed through the basalt. 2 duties wrenched us topside, ferrying the mangled to diminutive E-boats that darted like minnows to Kirken's lazarettes, or reconnoitering the cliffside paths etched above the roiling Greenland current. I loathed the former, scarred by a gunner, his uniform charred to rags, flesh bubbling from flash burns, who clutched my sleeve in delirium, rasping pleas to end his torment with a mercy round, his eyes twin pits of agony imploring release from the white-hot hell. The latter peril peaked on one cliff-hugging snoop. Descending a goat track gouged into vertigo's edge, we triggered a Stalin organ salvo that pinned us mid-rope, shells caroming off outcrops in ricochet symphonies. As point man, I dangled lowest, 200 feet sheer to surf-pounded reefs, harness frayed, neither ascent nor plunge viable, 12 shadows above dependent on my fraying nerve. Mountaineering acumen? Absent. Raw valor? In scant measure. Leadership? A forged moment's birth. Acrophobia's vice clamped my throat, fear a paralytic fog. Yet duty's lash cracked. Conceal this palsy, lest contagion spread. At lulls in the barrage, earth-shaking pauses, I vectored the uppermost down climber back up his trace, a human relay of salvation. Step by heartbeat they crested. On my ascent, their unwitting pathfinding eased the terror, though those 2 hours suspended in the gale, spray stinging, granite grinding palms, stretched to eons, each gust a siren's call to abyss. Autumn 1943 wrenched our battalion westward to the Litsa front, 50 kilometers shy of Murmansk, where the river's icy vein traced the Arctic Ocean's ragged hem, a bulwark of strong points flung across muskeg and moraine, sundered by leagues of desolation. In 41, Jebergsjager had hemorrhaged here, their crosses thick in the Parkina necropolis back in Petsamo, a somber acreage of white markers saluting the fallen under stunted birches. Our 44 pullback from Finnish soil would exact crueler harvest, graves denied to most who stiffened in the snowdrifts. Now, in 43's respite, attrition moderated. Parkina's sod absorbed our meager toll with quiet grace. Warfare devolved to skirmishes, sniper duels across the riparian haze, where Mosinagans cracked like winter twigs, probing patrols that dissolved into knife fights amid the sedge, localized stabs yielding bayonet clashes, guttural cries swallowed by the wind. Soviet heavies, 203 mm howitzers from remote batteries, laced our wire with but we lacked counter-battery teeth, reduced to peevish 81 mm mortars, spitting defiance. Lancer existence in these redoubts verged on atavism, a devolution to caveman squalor defying modern chronicle. A platoon 45 wraiths, cycled duties in eternal churn, 15 foraging for staples, loaves black as peat, meltwater hauled in jerrycans, coal script for the potbelly stove, 9 mm pistol rounds, from rear depots, 15 on stag, peering through loopholes at the white wastes, the rest catnapping or delousing, picks scraping knits from seams in rhythmic ritual, all crammed into a hand-hewn bunker. 50 square meters of frozen peat walled in logs and fascines, low-beamed like a Saxon mead hall, where a third could sprawl at best, the air thick as a sepulchre with snores and sweat. A lone basin sufficed for ablutions, feet scrubbed raw, tunics dunk gray, mess tins scoured to gleam, sand soap for bars were myths, detergents a general's jest, leaving a patina of grime like lacquer. Illumination flickered from carbide lamps of Lancer's alchemy, a bully beef tin bath for water, a Riesling flagon pierced for carbide slurry, a twist of rag as wick, all crowned by a gutted 9 mm parabellum slug, bored lengthwise into a gas jet nozzle. The bottle squatted in the can shallows, water wicking to fizz acetylene. The bullets bore channeled flame, a blue ghost dancing. Its progenitor? lost allure, but its debut awed me, a testament to grunt genius, transmuting scrap to solace in entropy's grip. Bunkers barred frivolities. No nook for heirlooms beyond foolscap for missives, pencil stubs for verse. Books? Contraband luxury. Fiddles or mouth organs? Silenced by space. Photos? Fodder for the stove. Radios? Prescribed, lest BBC whispers corrupt. The portal soul adornment, a lurid poster army issue, diagramming the louse's life cycle. Ovipositor to engorged nymph, captioned with hygiene edicts. Beneath, a tally sheet demanded daily delousing quotas, pencil proffered like absolution. Today I'd trade my archives for one snapshot of that fetid warren, its tiered bunks like charnel shelves, carbide soot veiling all. But cameras were scarcer than mercy, pilfered for officers' vanities. Truth, that rarest, or trickled from triad founts. The monthly Das Reich Goebbels Clarion, the Finnmark Soldiers' Wave Band, 20th Mountain Army's Echo Chamber, and furloughed comrades, bearers of hearsay. Das Reich arrived battalion-wide, one dog-eared copy cascading to platoon perches, freighted with the minister's morale elixirs, vituperative jeremiads against Judeo-Bolshevik plutocrats. Finnmark's ether hummed with edicts, sand sets in our lairs. Battalion HQ hoarded the lone Volksempfänger, whence we'd glean teasers. We now relay Dr. Goebbels' latest in Das Reich. Verity's vein? Furlough tales, Goebbels filtered yet laced with leaks. Like a year on, a comrade's whisper of camp horrors. Mass graves a Treblinka, Zyklon whispers. Truths that pierced my shell like shrapnel. Wages mirrored Intel's deceit. Triune currencies of illusion. Rubles, Lenin-stamped Zeppelins' hammer-sickle crests, plummeted to privy fodder, hyperinflated ghosts. Reich's credit cash-and-sheen, those funny marks for occupied spoils, bought naught but ration fags and schnapps, hoarded till pay pouches ballooned to braziers, leather straining like overfed ticks. Finnish marks held fractional sway in a war-ravaged land, but remoteness barred bazaars. En route to leave, we'd haggle for socks or halva, till Finland's ledger bled dry, marks evaporating like hoarfrost. Bunker's psyche stewed a cauldron, bedrock stoicism, fate's yoke resigned, a fragile aesthetic awe at Aurora's silk or ptarmigan's plume, leavened by dread's yeast, injuries maiming, death scythe, Siberian chains. This echoed Great War doughboys in Flanders mud, sand sides banner, universal trench terror. Surface shimmered Führer faith, Nazism's graft. Schooled in Hitler youth odes, drilled by Der Stürmer cartoons, sworn to the mustache's gaze. Variants abounded. Zealots thundered, skeptics simmered. Vocal the faithful, doubters, whispers and watches. Homesickness gnawed endemic, birthing soliloquies. Yarns of pre-war Christmass, pipe dreams of Fräulein's embraces, elegies and doggerel. A Berliner crooned, one die Kirching Locken Wiederlauten. When church bells toll anew, yes, then Berlin's peace. Another versified homecoming farce. Post-victory. Führer pensioned in Linz's lap of luxury. Reich in sybaritic bloom. Yet the Arctic's ragged revenants, mule-tethered, faunless, bearded wraiths, draw blank stares. Whence wanderers? From the world's arse-crack, they drone, lethargic as permafrost. Stress-fermented irritants. Proximity's vice, olfactory assault. Unwashed wool, foot rot, tobacco spittle. To this day, marching ranks trigger my recoil, nostrils flaring at the reek's revenant. Paradox, most lancers shrug the stench inured, all craved solitude's balm. Its lack birthing brawls from sparks, a nudge, a snore, a hogged blanket. Elders umpired truces. I, amid the melee, pondered all factions' subliminal sway, relation sense as primal cipher. You reek to me. No mere barb, but olfactory indictment, raw as exposed flesh. My bunker sanctum? Epistolary vigils to parents, Rom's steadfast duo, their replies vaporized in allied firestorms, and Paul, Neuruppin's airbase confidant, his fate interred in Siberian tundra. War's cull claimed most, one missive endured, salvaged by an ant post-hostilities, brandished as shield against my apostasy's barbs. A classic holdout screed, paeans to triumph's dawn, lauding Hitler's Himmler elevation to Ostfront command, imagining the SS sorcerer as Bolshevik bane, blind to his genocide's architect role. Ignorance cloaked the Holocaust machinery. Himmler's martial flop at Kharkov? Trifling. Shame bloomed later, not at error, but fate's fervor in history's twin butchers. Russians I mused held edges. Hinterlands webbed in rails and macadam. Ingenuity's bridge of frozen lakes ferrying 122s and T-34s where we floundered. Manpower's tide let the mass for thunderbolts, pouncing from blizzards. Facing us, a Siberian reindeer brigade, tundra suns, Klimakin, padded Valenki under smocks, bloating their silhouettes to ogre bulk. Blades flashing in knife dances redolent of Finn Winter War savagery or Karl May's Apache lore. They ghosted hours in drifts, closing on sentries. Vigils turned neural tightropes. Climates bite, nights pall, lands deceit. Brush moss boulders, shambling like trolls if stared too long. False cries invited lash, tardy alerts, doom's gambit. We slumbered uniformed, smock shed, blanket shrouded, Mausers couched, boots as bolsters, primed for toxin. Politics evolved. 3 propaganda-free years effaced Judenfabel. Der Stürmer's cabal dissolved to irrelevance. Focus riveted eastward. Rust defeat specter. Occupation's boot on fatherland throat eclipsed all. Captivity? Suicide's vow, shared pact with comrades. Magnum cold against palate over Gulag marches. Survival's grind sanctified the fray as anti-Russian crusade. Pearl Harbor's embers cold. Hitler's Pacific lunge forgotten. Had memory lingered, doubts might seed on Führer's caprice, quelled by insufficient intel ruse. Nazism's lens warped foes, America's might, Detroit's forges, Manhattan Project's hush, unseen ritual? Grasped decades on, Yankee Hood's gift. Knowledge then? Victory's mirage might shatter, yet Rus fixation fueled hope. Beat the Slav, claim the peace. Brits intruded sands. Churchill's bulldog snarl, absent his birth or sudden keelhaul. Might peace bloom? Prudent? Hesse's parachute folly, to Scotland whispered yes. Prophet scorned, at home per scripture. Heresy chilled. Führer's omniscience cracked? Smothered by data deficit bomb. Ominous hush cloaked Hitler. Months sans oratory, his thunder missed. Goebbels' Das Reich proxies polished dread, faltered. We wallen UND worden UNSEB setzen. Euphemisms retreat veil. Generals gloss troubling from paladin lips. Positives flickered. Das Reich's teasers. Jet Me 262's slicing skies. V2's arcing doom. Panther tanks prowling. Führer's reticence? Surprises gestation as Barbarossa's blitz. Trust? Mine absolute. I unburden thoughts to comrades erstwhile private. Rally flagging spirits. Foes distilled to Russia, Russia, Russia. Jews? Absurd diversion. Consensus bloomed. Dissenters amplified. One furloughed skeptic spat Himmler's Eurojail. Hitler spared but regime flayed. He, Sergeant Walter Führer, ironic moniker, diffused as Walter Donnerkiel, rhyming fart thunder. Vienna law student, 5 years my senior, NCO peer yet elder in cynicism. Hushed colloquies pierced bunker hush, sleeper's ire, foe's ears, indoors, outdoors, peril's hush. Once a soldiery kinema beckoned, admission a birch log toll. Projector jams, gifted debates interlude. Walter skewered racial gnosis as hokum. I concurred sans demur, but cleaved on crux. War lost Austria sovereign. I, winnable, Ostmark German vein. Film rolled, Teutonic schlock, Hollywood's gloss. Moon-washed Riviera, palm-swaying, Bougainvillea cascades. Tuxedoed Lothario croons when ich wust, when ich gekust. If I knew whom I kissed neath La Joe's midnight. Need this treacle? Gut hollow, eyes lacquered in wood smoke. Toes numb despite blaze. Psyche roiled by impasse. 2 hours hence. Death's antechamber. Now this saccharine sop? Idiots in Berlin scriptorium. Debrief. Walter, buoyant, credited my uplift to the Hauptmann. A reserve lieutenant, Dortmund scion, Nazi agnostic duties thrall. Ideology? Yawned, esprit? Prized. We ribbed his verstus due, tick, each dictum's query. Yet he tracked my ether, advancing my stripe more than Martinet kin. Rapport flowered, north-south chasms yawned. Prussians' faceless drones to Bavo-Austrian sneers, manners fault lines. Hitler, Linz-born, Munich claimed, grasped neither's pulse. Prius, southern slur for us flatlanders, isolated him. I, animosity's bridler, earned pentatonic sage. Weiss, from this elder's lips, avuncular jest. Bond odd, stiff salutes, interrogative patter. Paternal barbs, laced compliments. Dearest superior? Aye, reciprocity beckoned, veiled by mischance. First boon, non-martial furlough. His nomination to Kirken's Front Soldier Concert. Company Quota 1. Battalion seal needed. Captain, Bavarian stock, Kommaskopf archetype, army-bred lout, Kommas for grub, neutral, irked, Barrackenschwein. Scorned melody as enervant, banning Weinax leader, lest valor wilt. His ascent? Anomaly, unveiled later as ideological laurel. Trek, skis whispering 10K, lorry lurch to town, foot slog finale. Pianist essayed Mozart's A major sonata. Andante grazioso's lilt, pastoral bomb, smote visceral. Tears pricked, mass by cough. From insensate grind to beauty's gale. Sentiment cyclone, regret, resolve, threatened rapture's theft. Beethoven's tempest restored poise, catharsis sealed. Promptly, Assignment 1, Compagnietrupfer, Commander's Adjutant, Elite Quintet's Chief. Couriers to Zug and Battalion HQs. Hitler's Great War Echo. Tactics Cabal, Recon Plots, Foe Augurs, Manpower Chess. Bomb from Bunkers Paul, Stronghold Circuits Spice Peril, Messengers Prize Scalps. Debt's First Tender, Dawn Spud Detail. Lieutenant's Bratkartofelm, Nom de Guerre for Grease-Starved Hash. Ration fat stretched with barley coffee. Tubers frost-blackened rot. Morn reek wafted, I eyed the sous chef's fury, Schweinhund, leitmotif. Culminating in expectorated spite. Globules pearl in the sizzle. Dilemma, fealty clash. Sidestepped. Bade Doompage, remake from our scant larder. Sacrifices sting. Cook's perfidy? Long vintage, Lieutenant oblivious. Vow etched. Slight no scullion. Solitary stronghold jaunts thrilled. Danger's edge honed. Foes stalked dispatches like hounds. More rove soon. General Ferdinand Schorner, 19th Gebirgskorps Lord. Mandated NS-Führungsoffizier, Ideologues cadre, prefiguring Hitler's 44 post-Valley bomb fiat. Commissar Kinsan's Bolshevism's taint, purely motivational per Wehrmacht gloss. Company's dispatched duo to Battalion HQ. My summons? Enigma. 4 firm delegates fronted 2nd Lieutenant Joseph. Goebbels, lexical twin. Wordsmith of Wormwood. Hand class firm. Rarity cross ranks. He beamed. Company chiefs encomium exemplar NS. Captain's nod. Kirken's lark. Reliability's ribbon. Affinity? Fleeting. My schism endured, Nazis creed kin, ilk abhorrent. Joseph? Epitome. Parade to Captain, Grouch Redux, Hitlerjugend's tyrant reborn. Anxious virtuoso, sideways scold for sartorial sin, salute slack, Lancers Argo jewel, evoking trifles, lash under at attention freeze. Inspection, squads motley, white smocks versus Feldgrau quartet, mind poises fault. Pep? Bombast barren, verbiage void inadequacy confessed, word cargage, abdications pivot, leaving us snickering, befuddled. Joseph's opus, pedagogue's polish, main camp field tone brandished, der Arier, Menschite's Prometheus. Schoolboy echo now hollow, ex-orient lux traduced, face contorted, elegant antiquity slime. Coda, Doc Lichtkommt AUS dem Norden. Clumsy artless. Eyes northbound, spied wire snow ebon vault, no Valhalla's gleam. Aryan dawn's dirge segued Judenphobie. Venom's torrent, schoolmaster's leer redux, goatee tug. CF lechery's jest. Revulsion surged, bogey from Sturmer crypt, irrelevant amid real reaper's breath. Contempt choked outcry. Gott, Erit UNS von diesem NS Führer. Early 44. Battalion to Rybachy Isthmus, Fisher Peninsula's throat west of Murmansk. Mainland leash on Soviet salient. Gun symphony peaked. Yanks bounty. Ivan shells inexhaustible, potshots at lone shadows. Ideologues aura drew invites. Cross-firm harangues my gospel. Russia's sole foe. Juden red herring. Vehement, Anglo-American Pax imperative. Sans African Riviera folly. Half legions idled in Postalands, Balkans quag, Atlantic's vigil. Redeploy? Russ route assured. Fantasized, Teuton Westpact, East's carve-up. Blind, Casablanca's unconditional die. War crimes toxin barring parley. Heresy hailed, yet murmur reached ears. I, to Battalion. Joseph Solo, captain absent. Quotes verbatim, condescending nod. Warheit zu England, America, Doc Führer denkt. Dismissal's grace, perils past presumed. Delusion, fallout struck comrade Roper, fate's tragic fork. His terminus woe, mine irrevocably altered.